I almost titled this reading something different in my head when I first sat down with it, because the word tonight kept landing in a way that felt too specific, too bounded. And I was going to reframe it into something more open, more temporally generous, the way I sometimes do when a word feels like it is carrying more weight than it can actually support. And then I stopped myself, because tonight is the right word. Not in the literal sense of the hours between sunset and sleep, necessarily, but in the energetic sense of something that has the quality of tonight about it. Something that belongs to the register of experience that happens in the darker, quieter, more private hours, when the business of the day has released its grip and what remains is the actual texture of your inner life without the noise that covers it during daylight. That is the kind of shift coming, the kind you feel in the quiet. And what I want to do in this reading is prepare you for it with enough specificity that when it arrives, when you feel the ground of something rearranging itself beneath you in those still hours, you will not mistake it for anxiety or restlessness or the ordinary hum of an overactive mind. You will recognize it for what it is, something arriving. Before anything else, I want to acknowledge this community properly because they deserve more than a scripted opener. Something has been building in the comment sections of these readings lately, a particular quality of honesty, people sharing things that go beyond the reading itself, pieces of their actual lives, specific situations, the texture of what they are carrying. And I want to name that openly because I think it matters. This space has become something real, and that is not my doing alone. It is built from every person who showed up and decided, sometimes despite themselves, to be genuine here. Thank you for that. Genuinely. All of you, the ones who have been here from the beginning, the ones who found this last week, the ones finding it for the first time in this exact moment. You are part of what this is. Now, let me get into what I am actually seeing, because it has been pressing at the edges of my attention since I opened this, and it is time to give it the full examination. It is asking for the first thing, not the most comfortable thing, but the first thing, which in my experience is usually the most honest thing, the impression that arrives before I have had time to arrange it into something more palatable. Something in you is already aware. That is what hit me immediately, and that is what I keep coming back to as I sit with this energy. Not that something is coming toward you from outside of your awareness, but that some part of you, some layer of perception that does not announce itself through conscious thought, has already registered the approach of this shift, has already begun a kind of quiet preparation that your conscious mind has not yet been briefed on. You have felt it as something, maybe as a restlessness that arrived without obvious cause, the kind that makes you move from room to room in your own home without knowing what you are looking for. Maybe as a quality of distraction that has made the ordinary texture of your days feel slightly less solid than usual, as though the familiar surfaces of your life have become minimally translucent and you keep catching glimpses of something moving behind them. Maybe as dreams that you cannot quite hold on to after waking, but that leave a residue of feeling that follows you into the morning without a name. Something has been pressing against the membrane from the other side, and tonight, in whatever way tonight presents itself to you, that membrane is going to give. Let me try to get more specific about the nature of this shift, because I am aware that big energy shift is a phrase that can mean almost anything, and I want to give you something more precise than that to work with. What I am perceiving is not external in its origin. I want to say that clearly because There's a version of this kind of reading that locates the incoming change entirely in the outside world, in a person who is about to reach out, or an opportunity that is about to present itself, or a situation that is about to resolve. And while some of what I am seeing does have an external dimension, and I will get to that, the primary location of this shift is interior. Something in how you understand a situation or yourself within a situation is about to reorganize. Let me sit with that for a second, because I am not sure I have the right frame for it yet, and I would rather pause and find the accurate one than keep going with something approximate, right? Okay, here is a better way to say it. You have been holding two understandings of something simultaneously, two versions of a story that cannot both be true, but that you have been carrying in parallel, because committing fully to either one requires a kind of courage or a kind of grief that you have not yet been ready to move through. One version is the one you hope is true. That still contains certain possibilities, certain futures, certain readings of a person or situation that you prefer because they cost less, that allow things to remain as they are for a little longer. The other version is the one your deepest perception has already arrived at, that you know with a kind of bodily certainty that sits below the level of argument, that you could not be talked out of even by someone very convincing, because it is not built from logic that can be counter-argued. It is built from something more fundamental than logic. The shift coming tonight is the resolution of that doubleness, not violently, not through an external event that forces the choice from inside. A quiet, almost inevitable settling of the question in the direction of the version that is true. And that settling, that cessation of the effort required to hold both versions in parallel, is going to feel like something releasing in your chest that you did not fully realize you were holding. I am picking something up around a specific person, and I want to approach it carefully, because what I am reading is layered in a way that resists simple summary. This person exists in one of two categories for you right now, and the reading is not entirely clear on which one, which tells me that the ambiguity itself is part of what is resolving tonight. Either they are the subject of the two version problem I just described, the person whose nature or intentions or actual place in your life you have been holding in that uncomfortable parallel state, hoping one thing while knowing another, extending a benefit of the doubt that your deeper perception has stopped actually extending, even as the performance of extending it continues. Or they are the person who is about to be the vehicle for the shift, the one whose action or communication, or simply whose sudden renewed presence in your awareness, becomes the specific trigger for the interior reorganization that was already approaching. Both of those are present in what I am reading, and they may not be mutually exclusive. What I can say with more confidence is this. However, this person factors into what is coming. Their role in it is less important than what the shift produces in you, because the reading is insistently pointing inward rather than outward as the primary location of significance here. They are a catalyst, possibly, not the event itself. You are the event itself. Let me talk about what tonight, this shift, this particular quality of interior rearrangement actually feels like from the inside as it happens. Because I think knowing what to expect at the level of felt experience is more useful than knowing what to expect at the level of narrative. It is going to feel initially like discomfort, not crisis, not the sharp adrenaline-flavored discomfort of something going wrong, the specific, duller, more diffuse discomfort of something becoming unavoidably clear, of a fog lifting, which sounds pleasant in description, but which in lived experience can feel disorienting before it feels relieving. Because the fog, whatever it was composed of, whatever mixture of hope and strategic not quite looking, and the genuine desire for things to be other than they are, was also a kind of protection. And when protection lifts, even protection that was costing you more than it was giving you, the first response of the nervous system is not always gratitude. Sometimes it is a kind of naked exposure, a sudden aliveness to something that had been cushioned. I want you to stay with that feeling if it arrives, rather than immediately reaching for something to cover it back over. Because underneath the initial discomfort of the fog clearing is something that has been waiting a long time to be perceived directly, something true about the situation, about the person, if a person is involved, about yourself within all of it. And true, however inconvenient its timing or its content, is always ultimately lighter than the sustained effort of maintaining an alternative version of it. There is something else coming through that I want to name because it arrived with a clarity that I think means it is specifically for a portion of you rather than the general collective. For some of you, this shift is not about a complicated situation or a person whose nature has been in question. For some of you, what is arriving tonight is simpler and more personal than that. It is a recognition of yourself, of something about who you have become or who you have always been that you have not allowed yourself to fully see or fully claim, not because you lacked the evidence, but because there is a particular kind of internal permission that certain recognitions require before they can be received rather than deflected, and that permission is arriving. Something in the quality of this period, something about what you have moved through and what it has required of you, and what it has, in requiring those things, revealed about your own capacity, has built the specific internal ground from which this recognition can finally be received without immediately being minimized back into something smaller and more manageable. You are going to see yourself tonight, Virgo, perhaps for the first time without the particular filter of self-doubt that has been sitting between your perception and the actual picture. And what you see is going to surprise you, not because it is foreign, because it is so undeniably, completely, unmistakably you. Now, let me address something that the reading keeps returning to and that I have been circling without naming directly because I was waiting for the right moment to land it. The resistance, there is a specific habitual quality of resistance in you that I want to examine, not to criticize it, but to understand it, because understanding it is relevant to what tonight is asking of you. The resistance shows up at the exact moment when something good is becoming undeniably real. I know that sounds counterintuitive. Resistance at the threshold of difficulty makes obvious sense. That is the resistance most people recognize in themselves, the flinching away from pain or loss or disappointment. But there is another kind, rarer, more subtle. The specific resistance that activates not when something bad approaches, but when something good becomes impossible to deny. When the evidence of your own worth or your own capability or the genuine possibility of something you deeply want is sitting in front of you clearly enough that you can no longer comfortably deflect it, that resistance says things like, "It is too good to be real. I am probably misreading this. Something will complicate it. I should not let myself believe this yet." And it is convincing because it presents itself as wisdom, as discernment, as the hard-won caution of someone who has been disappointed before and is not going to be naive again. But in your specific case, in this specific moment, what I am reading is that the resistance is not wisdom. It is habit. The habit of protecting yourself from the specific vulnerability of fully receiving something good, of letting something genuinely positive land all the way in without immediately beginning the process of managing your hope back down to a safer size. Tonight is asking you to feel the resistance and receive the thing anyway. Does this land somewhere specific for you? That particular pattern of pulling back right at the moment when something is becoming genuinely real and good. I want to hear from you in the comments if this is a dynamic you recognize in yourself, because I think it is more common than people admit, and there is something valuable in naming it collectively. Let me describe what I am seeing on the other side of tonight. Not as a destination that erases the complexity of getting there, but as the specific quality of what becomes available after the shift completes itself. There is a lightness, not the weightlessness of having no problems or no complexity in your life. That is not what I am reading, and pretending otherwise would not serve you. The specific lightness of a person who is no longer spending energy on the maintenance of an internal division, who has stopped running two parallel understandings of something and allowed the more honest one to become the single operating version. That maintenance, that continuous effort of holding a preferred version alongside a perceived one costs something. More than most people account for when they assess why they feel tired or flat or vaguely depleted without obvious cause. When it stops, when the division resolves into a single, honest, fully inhabited understanding, something becomes available that was previously being consumed by the maintenance. Presence, actual, full, unencumbered presence in your own life, which sounds simple until you have experienced its absence long enough to know the difference. I want to say one final thing about the energy of tonight specifically, because I think the reading would be incomplete without it. Tonight is not the end of anything. I want to name that clearly, because shifts of this kind, interior reorganizations that resolve something that has been holding you in a kind of suspended complexity, can sometimes be experienced as loss, even when they are fundamentally clarifying. Because something does end, the doubleness ends. The particular version of hope that depended on the maintenance of the preferred story over the true one ends, and loss is loss even when what is lost was costing more than it was giving. You are allowed to feel that. You are allowed to have the shift be both clarifying and, in some smaller way, grief-tinged, both things at once. Relief and loss wearing each other's clothes, the way they so often do, when something genuinely resolves, rather than simply changing shape. What tonight is not, what this shift is not, is a closing. It is a clearing. The difference between those two things is everything. A closing takes something away and leaves the space empty. A clearing takes something away and leaves the space available. Available for what, you might ask? For whatever can only arrive when the space that was occupied by the maintenance of something that was not quite true has been genuinely, completely, honestly freed. And from what I am reading in your field right now, what is waiting to occupy that cleared space is considerably more real, more solid, more actually suited to who you are and what you genuinely need than what is currently filling it. You have no idea what is coming, Virgo. That is the title. That is the truth of it. But you are about to. And the you that receives it, the you that exists on the other side of tonight's quiet private interior rearrangement is going to be standing on ground that is finally, completely, unambiguously real. No parallel versions, no maintenance, no fog, just you, seeing clearly for the first time and longer than you probably remember. That is what tonight is for. Leave me something honest in the comments if this reading found you somewhere real today. Not a summary of what resonated, the specific thing, the sentence that made you sit up straighter or exhale or stop the video for a second before continuing. Those are the ones I carry into the next reading. Until next time, Virgo, tonight means something. Let it